All right, so I hope that you kind of keep an eye on that, Donna, if you would. Just like if you feel like they're not going to be able to see.
86.
Welcome,
supposed to read.
welcome AP fans. What do we say that AP stands for? This is on page what?
Answer the problem. Prompt.
Answer the prompt.
Answer the prompt. And so the prompt that I gave you was, how does Jonathan Edwards use his diction and structure to convince his audience to come to the light of Jesus. Okay, he calls being sinners being out of Christ, right? And so instead of like what one student said this morning or in first period, he wasn't trying to scare the bejesus out of them. He was trying to scare it into them. Okay. I don't even know where the term "scared the bejesus" came from. It might be blasphemous, and I probably am going to get scolded. My mom just felt the disturbance in the force. Right? Okay, so again, we're practicing our close analysis tools. Diction, and I'm just going to get rid of this. Is this on the screen, Donna? Can you see this?
Yeah.
Let me know if I go off screen, okay? I go off script all the time.
I think
But
you
I
can
really-
go to that green line. And you'll be good.
Okay.
I feel like a really cool microphone.
Okay, so diction, we're gonna have our evidence that we find and our commentary. And we've all, presumably, I hope, being the studious AP students that we are, have already read it and thought about it and found examples of his diction and his, I like to think of, more often than not, I think of syntax as, I look at it from arm's length, how the ideas are ordered in the sermon or on the page in the speech or whatever. Okay, organization, right? And hopefully you've read the speech and the background information. For those of you at home, you have read the, how his tonality, the sermon was so long and things like that, and what his ultimate purpose was. But the recipe is diction plus structure equals author's purpose, and how successful he was in achieving that. Okay, so I'll just kind of lay out for you the overall structure of what I see. Kind of like we did with the Dr. Raina Green piece. Am I still on screen here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, in a nutshell, he spends the bulk of his sermon, talking about doom and gloom.
Yep.
Right? Okay. In other words, there is this very threatening. A threatening tone that is established in this part right here, and then when he makes it down to his final point, the end, this much of his essay is basically his ray of hope.
Yes.
There is a ray of hope there, where he basically uses, he implores or calls to action his congregation, where he gives them something that he can do, right? Is that even legible? Oh yeah, you can see that. What? We get better all the time. Okay, all right. So we have our diction and our syntax here. Okay, so talk to me about some of these places where he's using language, where his word choice helps to capture his purpose. Alyssa?
Well, for the doom and gloom, he says there's the dreadful pit of the glowing flames of the wrath of God.
I said that. Dude.
Dreadful pit.
That's crazy.
Of,
So-
of the glowing flames of the wrath of God.
Of the glowing flames of the wrath of God. Okay? And what type of figurative language is that?
Descriptive
Mhm.
or imagery.
It creates imagery. Imagery is created because if you say that hell is a dreadful pit glowing a flame, it's kind of a metaphor, isn't it? Okay, so he's using a metaphor, and we're always trying to tie back to our rhetorical situation. Okay, right? And so we can tie that to his tone. His tone already is, what's a word that you would use to describe his tone there, Evan? Frightening.
Bad. Bad tone.
Okay, we can do better than bad. What's yours?
Mine was, like,
Tone word.
what?
Tone word. What's your tone word?
I didn't have a single word. It was like a phrase.
Didn't
Okay.
say it.
It's
Let's
like,
hear it.
like vengeance, I guess. Or it was a
Vengeful?
word. Yeah.
Does it sound vengeful?
Isn't that a word though?
Yeah, but like,
Right? Maybe that's part of his purpose.
yeah.
Preston, is to, you know, to paint God as a vengeful God.
That's what I said.
I think he would not as vengeful, but as a like just God, because he was saying like his whole speech was talking about people out of Christ.
Okay,
So it's the people who like weren't saved
okay.
who will get the wrath.
But
of
that's
God.
who he was talking to.
Yeah, so,
So,
he wouldn't.
He
well,
was
yeah, I
painting
guess
God as
vengeful kind of
vengeful.
makes sense too. But,
Yeah.
But it's not like, I don't know. It's not like he didn't give them a chance, because he kind of explains like you do have a chance to.
Okay,
Yeah, but that's just part of the purpose. That's not the whole purpose.
okay, so to paint God as a just God, I think that he gets there, but when he's like,
Yeah, when he's saying that, it definitely sounds vengeful.
okay, yeah, so he does get to that, okay, and, just so we know what we're looking for here, remember occasion is, exigence, like what inspired him to give this speech? What is the context, you know, who are the Puritans, and, you know, what led him to this particular church on this particular day to give this particular sermon, and, you know, the subject, we can just set for now, we'll just call it, you know, Sunday service. Just another day in church.
6 hours service.
Okay, not just another 5-6 hour service. Okay, so give me some more. What, you know, pieces of evidence did you find, Donna, that
Yeah, 1 second.
that help to really, you know, examples of figurative language or imagery that you found?
What I used was the like using the thread by saying that if God were like that, he has a control of cutting it like at any time, so he has like full control over every person.
You know, where is that part about the spider web?
It's at the beginning, I think.
It's in the middle of 89. The God that holds you over the pit.
At the
This one
beginning.
holds a spider, this one lives in the middle.
Okay? Alright. Hold you over the pit, much as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire. abhors you. Do you know what abhor means?
Hate.
He hates you,
Yeah.
right? And is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burns like fire. Okay? So, holds you over a pit, holds over pit
Pit of eternal
as
doom.
one holds a spider, what he calls a loathsome
Wait a minute.
insect.
That's tough.
Okay, over this pit of hell that we've already talked about. Okay, so we have this, and then he says, and then he abhors you. That's pretty harsh. Burns like fire. This right here. He abhors you. Now remember, he's talking about you, the sinner, right? So we have a simile here. We have this metaphor, and then burns like fire is a simile. And again, what is the likely effect that this has on the audience?
They're scared. of
Like,
their
it'll make them,
kids.
yeah.
It creates fear.
Okay, yeah. So it's this frightening, like what Evan said, a very frightening tone that's created here. It's almost like he is debasing or abasing, abasing or humiliating, to say that he abhors you, sinner, that he considers you a loathsome insect, sinner, right? Those of you who are out of Christ, right? It's like he's breaking you down. Think about where the audience is coming from. This is how we tie back. Here's how we add that level of sophistication. Think back to your notes from the background slide on the Puritans. What do the Puritans believe about every man is inherently what?
He's pre-death. Oh, evil.
Evil. Everybody, so your audience is inherently wicked.
Wicked. I like that
And
one.
they believe also in predestination. And this is his selling point, right? Because if you believe that only, if we're a Puritan congregation, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us in here, and only 4 of us are predestined to get into heaven, and 3 of us aren't, there's no way we really know that. So we're always kind of looking around and comparing ourselves to the others who are living this more austere and sanctified Puritan life, right?
Mhm.
And we're always going to be like, that's a real powerful tool in Jonathan Edwards' quiver, because in his toolbox, rather, tool in a quiver, arrow in a quiver, tool in a toolbox, right? I'm mixing my metaphors here, but anyway, we're wondering, am I a chosen one? And if not, I'm always going to be thinking, how can I live the best possible life so God will one day accept me into his kingdom, right? So that is tying back. This is what I mean, the sophistication and style point that you're working so hard to get from AP for answering the prompt, is tying it back to who your audience is on a basic level. Like, why would these images and this type of message be so appealing to this particular crowd, right? They believe in that predestination. And who can give me some other stuff, some other word
I got
choice
one.
that he uses that seems to be especially compelling?
The wrath of God is like the great waters that are dammed for the present. They increase more and more. And then later
Hang on. Great waters
That are damned for the present.
damned at present.
Yeah. And they just keep increasing.
Okay. So, why did you pick that? I
So-
love that.
So like I think it was referring to like your water was like the sins you commit or like do. So like the more you do, the more it piles up, and like the more it'll hurt you when it finally gets released, unless you like reform.
All right, good. It's a metaphor, and yeah, the water is either your sins building up or the power of God that's
Yeah.
building up, and it's just like pushing up towards you, right?
Mhm.
And it's being held back. And what is holding back?
The hand of God.
The hand of God. And it is his mere what that keeps him from just releasing that or letting you drop off that spider web. His what? His pleasure.
Yeah.
So he also, his tongue is, here's we get that, that idea, the audience that we are here, the Puritan audience is here to, or for the glory, and in this case, pleasure of God, right? And so that ties into the audience's expectation, okay, and how he plans his speech. It's part of it ties in with context even, okay? So these great waters, I love this metaphor because it creates this sense of kinesthetic imagery.
What is that? Isn't that like what you can feel or touch?
Yeah, it's like a feeling of, like
Yeah.
you feel the movement. Those of us who live on the, like, imagery should appeal to people on a, like, you don't use ocean imagery for people that live in the mountains.
No.
You don't use Microsoft Works imagery and stuff like that to people who are still living in, the imagery that a speaker uses is stuff that is appealing to that audience that where they live. We can imagine that ocean, pushing up with those tidal surges and stuff that storms create. Kinesthetic imagery is, you have your visual imagery, your auditory imagery, your tactile imagery that you can touch, your gustatory imagery that you can taste, your olfactory imagery that you can smell, right? And you have what we call kinesthetic imagery, which is like appealing to a sense of movement. And you also have that sixth sense. There's also a sixth sense that
What,
we
your
have, which
spidey
is more
sense?
like intuition. What's that? Spices.
Yeah.
Yeah, like turmeric and myrrh and cardamom and those beautiful curries that we love so much. No. All right, so here is an important thing where he shifts into this ray of hope. Before he shifts into this ray of hope, he uses a very powerful transition where he starts talking about you. He started early when he was talking about your wickedness. You are as heavy as lead. So he's using this, at some point in here, he shifts to a you, your, or you, which is a second person point of view. He's calling you out on a personal level. This might tie into the occasion. The background information that I forgot to include and this is part of the reason that I wanted to film this, was because Jonathan Edwards had this fall from favor, where he was a rock star minister. He traveled around to every village and hamlet and city in New England and gave his sermons. And people, they would just greet him, and like he was a hot shot. He was a big deal preacher. But then he started getting a little bit, like people thought that he was a little bit too aggressive, because he would start calling people out by name and by the sins that he knew that they maybe had committed. So like in Puritan times, there was no like client, patient, doctor, or patient, preacher, patient, psychologist kind of privilege, where it was like, you might get called out and be like, your wickedness, it brings you down like the weight of lead and pulls you towards this gaping mouth of hell, Preston. Especially when I saw you loitering over by the gambling board and drinking a little bit too much cider on Sunday, right? If they called people out personally and said, people, it would probably be a lot more serious than that.
Yeah.
But, John Proctor had an adulterous affair with Abigail Williams, and stuff like that. So people kind of turned on him a little bit. So part of, you could tie that back to the speaker or exigence. Now he's just using he's not calling people out specifically, but, maybe he's doubling down on his, this vitriolic rhetoric, instead of calling people out by name. So maybe you could tie back to him personally, trying to recoup the fame of his former years, and trying to convince these people to come to the light of Jesus, as it were, right? Okay, so that maybe is something that we can tie in with his exigence, what precipitates his need to be out here in, where are we, Concord? Enfield, Connecticut in 1741, which is also part of the occasion. 1741, Connecticut, right? Okay, so this use of the second person point of view. And finally, he gets to these, there is a ray of hope in all of this. And then we see that maybe God, like Alyssa has pointed out, is a just God. Because it says here, and now you have an extraordinary opportunity. Okay, well, first it says, God stands ready to pity you. And I'm going to put this right here in between. This goes under diction. God stands ready to pity you. Right? So there is a ray of hope here. He says, and now you have an extraordinary opportunity. Extraordinary opportunity. Right? So there is that ray of hope. Right? Therefore, let everyone that is out of Christ now awake and fly from the wrath to come. The wrath of Almighty God is now undoubtedly hanging over a great part of this congregation. Let everyone fly out of Sodom, Sodom and Gomorrah. Haste and escape for your lives. Look not behind you. Escape to the mountain, lest you be consumed. So there is that final warning. But there is a hope. You can escape. And that is, if you say diction plus organization equals his purpose, that purpose is that there is hope. It's not too late, right? You can, escape now. You can escape that wrath right now. And so that is part of his purpose. So if you're answering that question, I think that, you have plenty of evidence to show how he creates the threatening, ominous tone, but that there is a little bit of hope there for us. Despicable, abhorrent, loathsome sinners that we are. Right? Okay.
Naturally.
I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. There are two main types, and this comes into our the art of argument. This hope bit, okay, he uses two main types of sentences, and we'll get into this a little bit later. But he uses, and I hope you can see this at home, but hortative, Hortative, and imperative sentences. And I would like for you to add this to your notes. Hortative sentences implore or beg an audience to do something. There's this, in every good argument has a call to action. Okay, you've convinced me to go your way. Now what do I do? How do I do it? So you implore or beg. And imperative sentences are to command an audience, to dictate, to be an emperor. It is imperative that you do turn and run, flee from the wrath of God right now by turning to the sweet love of Jesus and give up your abhorrent, loathsome, wicked, sinful ways. All right.
Right.
So hortative is like suggesting.
Yes, hortative implores. Okay, please come to the light of the Lord. And imperative is, you will or you will burn.
So he used a lot of implorative sentences.
Imperative.
Yeah.
I think he
whatever.
uses more imperative than hortative, honestly. Don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. I just forgot the word.